Meeting is called to order. Has everyone had a chance to look at their agenda?
Yes.
And may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do you want to do it before? Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Do you want to do it before comments from the public?
Yeah, let's do it first. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll do it right now.
So before we have comments from the public, we're going to have a picture taken with our third graders who are here tonight sharing their projects on Indigenous cultures.
Can we get them up?
Great. So, students and staff, I think we'll take a picture right here. So we'll have everybody come right in. We'll right under the Wilton Public Schools sign.
I'm first.
Yeah, perfect. Come on, you be right in the middle here. Great.
Oh my God, right?
This here, come down a little further.
Now I'm in the middle.
Yep. Yep, here, keep coming.
Maggie.
Great. And how about we have Dr. Mitchell, can we put you right in the middle here?
Oh, I'm good over
You're on the end.
here.
How about this? You guys each hold that. All right, our first salute to excellence. I'll get on this side. Mrs. Coons taking pictures. Dr. Sal's taking pictures. Ready?
Everybody's taking pictures.
A little paparazzi going on back there.
Great. Now we'll look out here for these guys. Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Yes.
Thanks for
So
sharing with us tonight.
I did want the two teachers just to have a real quick chance just to kind of share a little bit about the work and to celebrate and give a little background knowledge about the presentation. So we'll start off with Nicole, and then we'll have Ezra as the LLC person to kind of share. And Jen, you can chime in if you would like. All right. So, Miss
Just what you
Nicole,
wanted, right?
I know, right?
So what you saw today was the culmination of a transdisciplinary unit of study. It was the first time we did this in third grade. And transdisciplinary really just means that it's an opportunity for kids to learn in a really authentic way that integrates lots of subjects at once. So they are doing a lot of hands-on learning in lots of different ways. So for those of you who are looking around, you might have seen that there were books displayed. And some notebooks I saw, some social studies notebooks. So we integrated all of our reading and writing standards into this unit through each learning activity. You also might have seen some artwork. There was a game going on that integrated some of our physical education activities. So it was called Little Sticks, and some of our board members played.
What else did you
We also used we use a lot of music, some technology integration through video allows, and of course we use technology for our research process and eventually to create the bit of our unit that you saw at the end, which is the artifact creation. And our LLC staff heavily supported this transdisciplinary unit from the beginning, especially with the integration of our technology resources.
And that's the beauty of collaboration between the teachers, between the teacher librarian and the classroom teacher, in really lifting the level of the teaching and the learning in the classrooms, where what they're doing permeates through the walls of the classroom and just really spreads across the hallways. When our 4th and 5th grade classes were going through the exhibit, the museum walk in our Learning Commons, they commented how much they loved listening to their 3rd grade buddies, and just hearing it from the students back to students, that feedback was incredible. And one of the things I think I can really truly attest to is the skills that we taught throughout the unit, because we focused on the process of learning. All the skills, the 21st century skills, the kids are living right now. They're not preparing for it, they're living. All of that was embedded, integrated into our teaching. So instead of having the content driven, this is social studies, this is reading, this is writing, this is communications, everything was mismatched and completely taught at the same time. And it was very fluid between the Learning Commons, the classrooms, and the level of collaboration was incredible professionally, very rewarding, and just looking our students, just overall a fantastic experience.
I just want to add that another great piece is that there was student choice. We weren't telling the students what artifact to pick. They made their own decisions. They chose how they were going to make it. They decided what to research about it and even how to make that actual design. And then Ezra was talking about collaboration, and there wasn't just collaboration among the teachers. The students collaborated and supported each other. When somebody got stuck, they might have said, hey, I have a great idea for you. So all of that great learning was happening all at once.
And also the negotiation skill. I remember in your classroom, kids saying, oh, I want to do this, but can I do that? And the fact that they problem solve together, and that's what we really truly want our students to do, our kids to do. So it was incredible just watching it.
And I just want to celebrate to our faculty and our staff, and these teachers are an example. It's been an amazing amount of work learning the new curriculum and taking this different way of presenting information and working with our students, and they have knocked it out of the park. So they did an amazing job, and so huge celebration to you guys, and thank you for all of your hard work.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll invite you back soon.
Well done, guys.
I'm gonna give this to, Dr.
Well done. Great job, guys.
Yes, I did.
Well done, guys. All right.
Meeting that never ended.
I said that was Chuck in third grade.
Right.
He said, no, actually it wasn't. Okay, I'd like to see that.
All right. Huh? Don't you wish? Don't you wish? No, well, it's downhill from there. Downhill from there.
So we have an opportunity now for comments from the public. If anyone from the public would like to come and address the board, you'll have another opportunity at the end of our meeting as well. Seeing no one coming up, has everyone had a chance to read the consent agenda?
Yes.
And may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes. Okay. And now time for reports from, the board chair has no report. And we can go to the superintendent.
You're going to hear from me in a little bit, so
Okay.
I'm going to save all of that for later.
All right. Any committees want to report?
Well, just business ops, you'll hear about what we did this morning at our 7:30 meeting. Later, as we get into it, our primary topic of discussion was the upcoming budget presentation that you will see tonight with some questions and input. And other than that, we discussed briefly the opportunity for us as a committee to get together with the Board of Finance as it relates to an understanding, improving the understanding about our whole special education program and what we're doing and why we're doing what we do and how we do what we do and all that goes into special ed. The feeling is as we go into this budget season that it's incumbent upon us to help them fully understand the intricacies of what we face and our needs in the area of special ed. So we're working with John Calamaritas, who is their representative on our committee, to try and arrange a get-together solely focused on that area of what we do. And hopefully that was going to happen soon.
Okay.
As we get to that. That's it. Okay?
Well, that's a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it will be
huge.
good. It will be a good time well spent, I think. I'll get to it.
All right.
Teaching and learning. We met last week and we discussed three things at that meeting. First is we saw a presentation and discussed the proposal for the Costa Rica trip. And I'll save all my comments because it's on our agenda, so we could talk about it then. We also talked a little bit about the 6141 process, which, as you know, is the process by which new curriculum is introduced and brought to the Board of Ed for approval. And we decided as a group that over the next few months, over the spring months, we're going to continue to go back and revisit this process to see where changes might be necessary. We thought in terms of, like, if you recall, I think it was October, November, we had one of our board meetings where we had like 6 or 7 new proposals presented to us all at once. And so we talked about,
Overwhelming.
yeah, that it was a bit overwhelming to get all of that information in one meeting. So we're going to talk about the timing of the presentations, when they're presented to us. There was also discussion about, should this be just limited to curriculum at the high school, or should it be K-12? So we'll be looking at that to see how we can incorporate that into the policy, and also discussion around, is this curriculum only, or is this all projects and programs that we're doing? Or is it strictly curriculum only? So these are all the types of discussions that we're going to be having over the next few months, and we'll keep you updated on that. And lastly, we discussed the honor roll. And I did notice there was a bulletin article about that this week. And I just want to say this. The discussion of the honor roll, as it came up in this meeting, is really just a small part of a larger discussion around reward, recognition, grading, and that sort of thing. And in our quest for continuous improvement, we're always talking about these type of topics. The administration talks about it, we talk about it in teaching and learning, we do here at the board table. But yes, it's not, there was a decision made this past fall not to publish it in the newspaper any longer, but beyond that, there's been no decisions made to change it in any way. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to just go forward with that. But in the meantime, we are looking at it, but again, under the umbrella of a larger discussion about reward, recognition, and grading and that sort of thing. So just, just to kind of calm everybody down, there's no major changes coming. The handbook, the program, what is it? Program of studies is going to go out for the next school year. It's going to include the honor roll. The honor roll will be in place next year, and we'll keep you all posted should that change. But for now, everything is pretty much status quo. And those were the three. Anything else you wanted to add from that discussion? Sure.
On the honor roll, you said a decision was made. Can you just talk a little bit about the process and who was involved and
That was
where
during.
the high school voices are?
Oh yeah, it was. I think this goes back to September, during one of our T&L meetings, where just because of the agenda items, we happened to have a lot of ILs. In fact, all the people who presented all their 6141s to us this past fall happened to be at that meeting. So we had a very good, robust discussion about the pros and cons of publishing it. And there was kind of consensus in the room that day that it would be better for privacy issues for the students not to no longer publish it. And I guess Dr. Smith can speak to this, but there was not a need to bring it to a Board of Education level for.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, I don't think historically that's an item that is entertained by, at least here, this Board of Education. I think that, the conversation really began last year, and it's been ongoing off and on. And so I think the question, as Lori was just alluding to, is, what is and what should constitute academic honors? So the high school staff did some analysis, and the GPA cutoff for our honor, not our high honor, but our honor roll, was actually, a couple of tenths of a point lower, I think, than some of the surrounding DERGs. And given the large number of kids that achieve it, not looking to diminish their success, but I think legitimately raised the question of, is the honor roll serving its purpose? And that was really and then there were the related concerns about the publication of names in the paper.
And I want to to the publication, I just want to point out that the first quarter came and went. Those who earned honors, they received their report card, they received their certificate and all of that stuff, and everything was fine. And Dr. Smith reported, and Bob O'Donnell reported in our meeting, not a single word. Students, parents, even the newspapers, nobody contacted the schools in any way to say, hey, where's the list? It's not published. So it's almost as if it wasn't missed. It wasn't until the Bulletin did the article about the honor roll not being published that I then saw online people are now starting to voice their opinions about that, pro and con. And with any decision we make, whether it's the calendar, the budget, whatever, there's going to be people who are in favor of something and those who are not in favor of it. So that's a little bit of the history of that.
And the program hasn't changed at all. It's
No.
still, the honor roll's there, the high honor roll's still there, the same criteria.
Yeah.
And, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think of it the same way, because I think, we'll still, I assume there are articles about who's in National Honor Society and who does the science fair, but we don't publish what your SAT scores are, And it's kind of similar, I would just, in terms of privacy, students' GPAs are going to them, That's my personal.
I just think it's a subject that we need to continue to discuss.
And we will, but
And-
again, as part of a larger, I
Yeah.
think Dr. Smith brought up good points about, as it relates to our grading systems, reward and recognition, and how does this fit in, and is it appropriate? And there are schools in our DIRG, I think Darien is
Darien
one
is-
of them.
doesn't have it at all.
Doesn't have it at
They've
all.
done away with it.
Yeah.
Because I was
So-
doing the research a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
trying to see how we compared with others in terms of what our criteria was and where we stood relative to other systems. And, you know, New Canaan's is there in their handbook, et cetera, and Richfield and all. Darien, I couldn't find anything.
No, because it doesn't
And I called them
exist.
and I said,
Yeah.
look, here's what I'm doing, I'm trying to find, well, we don't have any more. We did away with it. You know,
Yeah.
we saw no need for it. It doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever, and they have totally eliminated any honor roll recognition whatsoever.
And the counselors who were part of that meeting in September
Yeah.
all supported the fact that
Schools,
school,
Darius said schools don't-
colleges aren't,
Yeah.
they don't really give much credit to,
I-
because the honor roll is such a subjective thing, school to school, district to district.
Right.
So,
There's no national standard for it.
no, there's no national,
why-
right, that's the point, there's no
why-
national standard
Well,
for it.
we've talked about that before in other areas.
But again, it's an ongoing discussion, so anybody with input and thoughts and whatever, feel free to share.
Lori, just
yeah.
I think the last and maybe more important point on the whole thing.
Yeah.
At the conclusion of the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, Dr. O'Donnell is going to be pulling together a committee of staff to really entertain the question that Lori started with around, you know, what is it that we want to and ought to be recognizing under the umbrella of student academic achievement and maybe arts and athletics achievement, and let's really dig deep in that and, you know, come back with some recommendations for some proposals for new ways to do that.
Yeah, I just, you know, I think when we do recognitions, it should be really exemplary. I mean, it should be the highest critical criteria. We should establish a criteria that really is difficult to achieve, but if you get there, then you deserve that recognition. But when you have 80% of your student body maybe an honor roll or high honor roll, there's something amiss in my view. I mean, that's really, I think it bears continued examination.
Well, yeah, and we'll look
Yeah.
forward to Bob O'Donnell putting together the committee and studying it, and, you know,
Yeah.
we want to reward and we want to decide how we
Absolutely,
reward
yeah.
our students, and, but it's definitely a high school project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where my question was coming from. It's, you know, does the board have a role in this? We can have 6 different opinions or more.
We probably do.
Or is this a high school
It's a
decision?
high school
yeah.
decision.
So then, you know, let's just hear the background and the
Yeah.
thinking and,
Right,
you know,
and
be
that's
able to
pretty
ask
much
the
Yeah.
what it was
questions.
at
Okay.
TNL.
Share
It was just a
teaching learning.
discussion about it. Certainly the TNL committee did not make the decision. It was a high school administration decision.
Okay, good.
Okay. Policy and
We do not meet,
communications?
we're meeting next week.
Okay, great. That's good. Okay, so now we're on to the Wilton Reads.
Right,
It's on
so
for
we
review
want
and
to
discuss.
invite Elaine Tyloria from Wilton Library and our Director of Digital Learning, Fran Compar, to come forward. So I don't know if everybody's aware, but tonight is a reveal night for the
It's
Wilton
happening here
Reads.
at
It's
the Wilton
happening
Board of
here
Education
and
meeting.
now. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
First announcement.
right? So if you just tuned in, you got here just in time. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Okay, reveal time. Good evening. I'm Elaine Tyloria, Executive Director of Wilton Library. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about our plans for Wilton Reads 2019. I'm sure you're all familiar with Wilton Library's annual Community Reads events. However, to briefly recap, for this program, the library selects one book, which we invite the entire community to participate in reading it together. The goal is to deepen appreciation in literature through reading and discussion. Over the past few years, Wilton Library has been presenting programs to complement and enhance the reading of that book, thereby, of course, facilitating a richer appreciation of the work. For example, last year's program focused on Cuba, with a reading of Waiting for Snow in Havana by Professor Carlos Ayer of Yale University. The community learned about Cuba from its early history through current times, as well as its culture, politics, economy. As the cultural and intellectual center that the library is, our mission is to inform, connect, enrich, and inspire our community. Wilton Reads is one of the ways in which we accomplish this goal. This year's Wilton Reads, for Wilton Reads, we have selected the New York Times #1 bestseller, The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. The book is an historic fiction based on the life of Auschwitz-Birkenau tattooist Ludwig Sokolow. It is a story of hope, courage, and survival in the face of the horrors of the Holocaust. With the reappearance over the last few years of signs of intolerance, anti-Semitic symbols, hateful graffiti across the nation, it became apparent to me that we are quickly losing the oral history of the generation that lived through World War II, and most importantly, the voice of Holocaust survivors. As they say, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It is therefore essential that we keep history alive and pass on its lessons to future generations. This was the motivation behind selecting a book about the Holocaust. We plan to enhance the reading of this book with valuable programs to stimulate discussion about the Holocaust and indeed the lessons learned from World War II. Over the past several months, Fran Kampar, your Director of Digital Learning, and I have been working to develop areas of collaboration between Wilton Library and the schools. It has also been the library's desire to once again collaborate with the school district for Wilton Reads. This was done for the first time in 2001 when the reading of To Kill the Mockingbird by Harper Lee was a joint community reads. Coincidentally, Fran and I had worked in Greenwich when Greenwich Reads Together was launched. A community reading event was therefore a natural springboard for us to select a book and topic that would be relevant to the community at large. I believe this year's Wilton Reads selection will bring together the community to understand and appreciate the Holocaust and the events that took place during that time. The highlight of Wilton Reads 2019 will be the book talk by Heather Morris on Thursday, April 11th from 7 to 8:30 at the library. She will be visiting Wilton Library from Australia, and this will be her only New England stop during her U.S. tour. She has also agreed to speak to the high school students. I would like to briefly share an overview of some of the library programs that are currently being finalized. The kickoff will, as I mentioned, be in April. We'll have a limited book giveaway, courtesy of Fairfield County Bank. We'll have book discussions, a Holocaust survivor talk, a presentation of art inspired by the Holocaust. And this art presentation is unique in that the artist is no longer with us, but his daughter will give a presentation of the art. We won't have any of the art there because, of course, it's extremely expensive, but we'll have slides. So this should be an incredible presentation. We'll also have some exhibits and artifacts to recount the Holocaust and World War II. Also, the viewing of a surviving Torah, which was brought from Czechoslovakia. And coincidentally, this artist had escaped Czechoslovakia. So the coincidence was incredible. We're also planning a musical performance, a concert of classical music written by Holocaust victims, a poetry seminar on works coming out of the Holocaust, a moderated documentary film viewing, opportunities for viewing other documentaries on an individual basis, a Wilton Clergy Association program, and other age-appropriate programs for children, and most likely some other programs that are being finalized now. The library has also invited other local organizations to be community partners, and we received a wonderful response thus far. I will readily concede that this is a very ambitious program. It's a big undertaking, however, an important one. And the Wilton Library Board of Trustees and the staff, we're very committed to doing the best job we can. And I am very, very grateful to Fran and, of course, to the school district for collaborating on this event. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Fran, and she will tell you about some of the plans underway here at the school. Thank you.
Thank you. And good evening, and thank you for this opportunity for this co-announcement and this reveal. I would like to first express my thanks to Elaine and her staff for including me, and therefore, as a result, the Wilton Public Schools in partnering in this year's Community Reads program. The Wilton Public Schools is very proud to partner in this particular program. The shared reading of one book is a conversation starter and a vehicle that drives deeper thinking and empathy for the author and the struggles. Most importantly, reading a common book provides a perfect springboard for a community-wide, intergenerational conversation that will enrich all of us, young and old. The selected title, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, is based on a true story of courage, optimism, love, and survival during the Holocaust. It is a story that tells about the best of humanity during the worst of all times. In this heartwarming, thematically rich book, the protagonist states that each day you wake up is a good day. Learning to be grateful by giving to others and saving even one life made each day a challenge. One of the best quotes from the book is, "When you spend years not knowing whether in 5 minutes' time you will be dead, there's not much that you can't deal with." The topic and themes of the selected Community Reads title are very timely. Speaking to the importance of this topic, this past year, our state legislators enacted a law requiring all Connecticut public schools to have a course of study that includes genocide education and awareness. Although the Community Reads program is a programming event, it serves as an additional way for the Wilton Public School students to engage in this learning. As stated by Rabbi Philip Lasowski, a Holocaust survivor, teacher, spiritual leader, and chaplain to the state Senate and lead advocate for the legislation, our children will learn about how to fight against hate, how to treat each other with humanity, and make this world a better place. I have convened a Wilton Public School Community Reads Task Force who's been charged with selecting the most age-appropriate titles that address the topic. Following the American Library Association's recommendations, we'll be selecting from a list of titles for our youngest children at Miller Driscoll that address tolerance for those that are different from us. In grades 3 through 8, we have narrowed down the choices to a few highly acclaimed titles from which we will make our final book selection. And our high school students will be encouraged to read The Tattooist of Auschwitz. We will have information on the actual grade level band title by the end of this month, as the task force is continuing to meet this month into next month. But some of the program events that we have proposed include book displays in our libraries of age-appropriate thematic book titles, book discussions with parents and children that are going to be supported and led by our friends at the Wilton Library, an author visit at Wilton High School, as you have heard, on April 11th during the day, a collaborative project, which I'm very excited about, between the library and our high school video production students that will involve recording the stories from survivors or their children or grandchildren. Book lists for parents to augment home discussions, and we will also have participation in a limited giveaway of books with the Wilton Library. Our task force will be finalizing all these plans, and we will have information on our website and actually send it out to everyone so that everyone knows what the actual books are and how to access it. I also finally want to thank again the Wilton Library for the partnership and the opportunity that this is going to afford all our community members. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations that this is going to engage everyone. So we'd be happy to take questions at this time. Thank you.
I have no question other than just a comment how timely this is and how appropriate I think it is. You know, the news just this week that came in the press about the magnitude of the horror was just mind-boggling. And so I commend you a fantastic selection, and particularly at the high school level, obviously. And there are other great books at the middle school level
Yes, yeah.
that are more than appropriate, that paint a picture that is appropriate at that age group. So I think it's key that we be age appropriate in our selections and what we introduce. High school, certainly. I think it's fantastic and incredibly timely and important to do. I really do.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Will one be able to purchase this book at the library or put an order in for it?
We will have the free giveaway coming up actually on, in February 27th. In the day, we'll have a 10 o'clock a rollout giveaway, free giveaway, and also that evening, some books will be reserved. I have brought some free copies for you this evening, so you may not have to join the line. But yes, the community will have the opportunity to. And again, thanks to Fairfield County Bank for sponsoring over the past several years. So we'll have a few hundred copies to give out to the community.
And you'll have some in the collection as well for people
Yes,
who are.
yes, some are in the collection already. Yes.
Awesome.
You said, I'm just ignorant about the book. You said the author lived in Australia?
Yes, actually, she's from New Zealand and settled in Australia. And it's a very touching story because she was contacted by the gentleman, Mr. Sokoloff, and he wanted to share this story before he passed. His wife had died, and they had met in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And the story is really how they survived. He was, and I don't want to give away the whole thing, but essentially he was designated as a tattooist. And he met her going through the line and had to tattoo her number. And it talked about how they survived and to the end of the war. They ended up settling in Australia. So before he passed, he wanted to share this story. He contacted her, and over several months, actually, I think a couple years, the story unfolded. There's a very touching clip that he recorded before he passed, and that will be available on the website as well. So she will be doing a U.S. tour, and we were fortunate to be able to get her. Yeah.
That's quite a coup.
Yeah, we got a pre-pub copy, and we really worked hard to get it, so, yeah. So, any other questions? Well, thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to working together, and I'll pass over the copies.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Fantastic.
both of
Thank
you
you.
for collaborating.
And anytime you bring presents, you're welcome back as often as you like.
I figured as much. Anybody brings presents.
Of any kind.
How about that?
Thank you.
How awesome is that?
Thank you,
so
Elaine.
much. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to take one for Chris?
Save one for Chris, and then we'll have, you guys can arm wrestle for the other two. So we'll just pass them around.
I have a copy.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the Costa Rica trip, and should we, Lori and I, talk about it?
Yeah, we don't have a presentation. We supplied the materials and thought we'd just kind of share the presentation,
Sure.
and then we'll have it for a vote at the next board meeting.
So Matt Hoyt and Brett Amaro came to Teaching and Learning and presented the trip. They had actually gone to Costa Rica last summer with this group, and
Without students, they
yes,
went
just the two of
with
them
the
went because
Costa Rican Resource Group.
yes, and they actually contacted them because Richfield goes every year. Their middle school, Eastridge, goes, sends a bunch of kids, and so they contacted. They thought Wilton would be a good source, and I have to say, listening to Matt Hoyt talk about it, we should all move to Costa Rica. I mean, just incredible experience. I mean, he said it was spiritual, and it was just fits so well into our vision and our what we value in Wilton and the Wilton Public Schools, and talking about they're living in the village, and so that's supporting the village, but also just sustainable. Picking your food and then working with the nature center and the preserve and just everything. And he was talking about, you pick the coffee and you grind, you roast it, and you drink it all day long, but it takes a lot of work. I mean, I think, and so I think we all at the table felt what a great opportunity for the kids, and they opened it, it's gone to the environmental science students at all levels of environmental science, and then moved on to AP biology. And they have a fair number of people who are willing to commit to go, and parents are like, if you get enough kids, I'll be a chaperone, and, and this is really just, we're just excited because after the Germany trip, and just, I think we've all been interested in the high school developing more international travel and the opportunities, and I think, do you have anything to add to?
Yeah, I would say what really impressed me the most about this is that it's a science-based trip. So often in school districts, when you hear about traveling abroad, it's usually world language related, and of course we're now going to do our second Germany trip coming up this summer. So this was really exciting to hear something from the discipline of science, and how we were saying that how this could then spark interest in some of the other disciplines to look for opportunities. And it doesn't necessarily have to be abroad, but it could be, within our own country, whatever. Although Andrea and I both volunteered, right? We're going to do a culinary arts trip to Tuscany. So
Wait, Lori,
that'll be at our next meeting. We'll present that one.
You
Right.
committed to, you were interested in math.
Yeah, and I thought that there could be a math,
for Lori.
right? Trudy, come up with a math trip somewhere. Yeah, your idea was to go measure the pyramids and whatever would be a good one. Good math trip, so.
In
Yeah.
the presentation, it calls for 12 students. What happens if we get 16 or 20 that want to
Then
do
they'll
it?
add, more.
So 12, each
But their
group would
target
be-
is 12
the
right
target
now.
is 12.
Because
Okay.
they wanted to start small,
okay.
and.
It's first come, first served then in terms
But what I
of-
understand, and maybe he said, like 80 kids go every year from Richfield.
Not at once, but.
Not all at once, in
But
different
they-
groups,
yeah.
but they have
And it's a
they've been
different age
participating
group,
for
too.
several
Yeah.
years, and so this program can go lower age groups, and they customize it for the age group that they're dealing with at the time.
Right, but we're high school here for this program.
Right.
Right.
We're looking at the high school,
students,
right.
So it'll be,
I think it's fantastic.
yeah, no, it was really
Yeah.
exciting, and as Lori said, having it be science-oriented, and.
And the
but of
presentation
course-
was excellent in terms of what the trip
yes.
consists
What it's
of,
yeah.
the schedule
Do
was.
they have to be
really-
students in AP biology or in?
Well, it's environmental science. The high school offers an AP environmental science, but they also offer environmental sciences at other levels. So the environmental science students, so you don't have to be in an AP class to be
okay.
eligible to go.
Right.
They moved on to the AP bio students because they need to have
Just to
enough
have
people. Because it's the first time, I think, people, and it's, they don't want to go too far ahead of themselves until they have approval. So that right now they just had
Is there any urgency in terms of timing on this, getting?
we
the
asked them
approval?
that, and they said they're okay if we vote on it January 31st. That
Okay,
gives them enough
all right,
time.
I just, because I was going to say, I would,
No.
yeah.
We were like, oh yeah, no, we brought that
Okay.
up because we were
Alright.
also concerned about that.
Yeah.
But they seem to think as long as,
this week,
yes.
okay, good, all right. So
And,
we can follow our normal protocol,
Right.
okay.
And the group is very responsive to their needs, and they talked about because it's, there'll be one of the naturalists on the group will be a woman. It's not just men leading it, and they're just very conscious of the kids' safety. And as I said, I was ready to
Okay.
go have coffee all day.
Birds, bats, and big cats.
Yeah, okay.
Lori's
Best naturalists in the world.
Chocolate.
What?
and there's- yeah.
Chocolate. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry, Debbie.
Yeah,
Can't
we
believe
were
we got the
we were
commitment.
ready to sign me up, yeah.
And Lori wanted the spiders because she loves
No.
spiders.
That was the part, that was the day of the trip, I'll
Yeah,
go to
I
the
know,
mall
right?
that day.
Butterflies from Belize.
I'll go to the
Anyway.
butterfly farm that day, yeah.
So,
Okay.
thank you for,
Yeah.
Sounds great.
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, and now, onto the math curriculum review. And we have a lot of math people in the audience so thank you all for coming in tonight.
Right as the camera shifts.
Did you get my email about the?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and, I'm serious with that. Cyril's probably gonna follow up with you, because she wants you to know that. She goes, it might be canceled, so it's not. I think enough people, but, you know, I just want you to know, it's okay, no one's, you know.
Sorry, take a few minutes. I'm sorry I don't have presents. But you're always welcome. Thank you. Your presence
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. We have a few of us. This is a and I think this kind of emphasizes the fact that this was very much a group effort on the part of the Math Curriculum Review Committee, and everybody here was a part of that committee. Laura Cannell is an instructional coach at Miller Driscoll, member of the Math Curriculum Review Committee. Cindy Cherico is instructional coach at the high school and co-IL at the high, and Julianne Walsh is the instructional coach at middle school. Randy Rondano is the instructional coach at Cider Mill. And we have Brenna Dunn, back from a brief hiatus, who's with us, math teacher at Middlebrook, and Stephen Doré, math teacher at Middlebrook. And Peggy is back there too. So Peggy Muir is the other co-IL at the high school. Thank you. Great to be back and talk about my favorite subject, math. So let's get going. A lot of the material that you'll see, you've seen before. The approach with this presentation was to kind of synthesize all the material that we've shared with you to date. This really is the working document for what will be the public presentation, public in terms of what the entire faculty will see and what the public at large will see as we present the ideas. If you have questions along the way, just jump in. Some of you have asked questions. We'll try to address them. If you feel like they haven't been addressed sufficiently, then by all means, just kind of jump in. Now we're going to see how well I'm. Oh, got it. Great. Background, the Math Curriculum Review Committee was structured very much like all the curriculum review committees at Wilton. We incorporated feedback from over 2,000 respondents to our needs assessment survey. We reviewed best practices both within district and outside the district. And with that information, we identified a series of program improvements, which we will talk about tonight. We've never really given you the opportunity to see who is on the Math Curriculum Review Committee. And the structure, again, is very much like the structure of all the content area review committees. There's representation from central office, the Board of Education, administrators from each of the schools, teachers from each of the schools, all the instructional coaches, parents, and from the high school we had students as well.
There's no parent from Middlebrook. Was that an oversight or just?
No, there was no oversight. I think we just never, there were some asks made and people weren't available. There is by no means not an oversight.
But can I just say, I know, just looking at the names, that
Yeah.
some of them had Middlebrook students at the time.
Well,
They might
yeah,
have
they
been
may have
listed under the high
before.
school.
Yeah.
I know,
Who had
some of
been
them
through
def-
Middlebrook, yeah.
No, but I mean, they
But we also
actually,
had a child
Yeah,
at
So-
the school.
all right, okay, good,
I
okay.
can assure you that they had
Okay,
Middlebrook
good.
children at that moment.
Because that obviously is an area of concern, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. We came down to 3 broad recommendations in the areas of curriculum and instruction, instructional time, and the math course sequence. The goal of the committee was very much to find ways to improve math learning outcomes for all students in Wilton and to enable more students to experience rigorous math learning at a variety of levels. I want to just say, we'll go into the recommendations in greater detail, but curriculum and instruction really focuses on the alignment of our curriculum and scaling up the best instructional practices wherever they are in the district. Instructional time, we sought the goal and have identified ways to protect existing and increase instructional time where needed. And in terms of the math course sequence, we want to provide the necessary foundation, particularly at the middle school level, for students to be successful in higher levels of math at the high school. A quick overview. The work on the curriculum itself actually began this summer. We did quite a lot of work during the summer to further align the curriculum to implement and incorporate more resources And at the elementary schools, as you know, we're focusing on fluency, number sense, and as we progress through that, we're going to stretch that work out over 3 years. So each summer, we'll be rewriting 2 or 3 units each year, so that it's not a lot to digest for the classroom teachers at the different building levels. We continue with advocating for and utilize coaching support, where coaches will work with the teachers to reinforce instructional practices and support their content knowledge. We have put forward the consideration for an additional math coach in each of the elementary schools. I recognize where we are in the budget process, but just taking into account the ideal caseload for a coach is around 20 to 25 teachers. Our math coaches at the elementary school work with 35 to 40 teachers. So it doesn't mean they can't achieve improvement, but working with that many teachers, it will take them longer. And you'll also see where that comes in the detailed implementation timeline that we have at the end of the presentation. We talked about, we have sufficient instructional time at the elementary schools. We have 60 minutes a day. So the goal at the elementary level really is to preserve and protect that instructional time. It's very easy, we all know, to see that instructional time slip away with different building events and activities and schedules, so that's really important. At Middlebrook, we do have insufficient instructional time. We're at the lower end of our DIRG in terms of scheduled instructional time at 41 minutes. Other schools are at 45 minutes or whatever, but we are at the lower end. The actual instructional time, a number of the teachers have kept track of how much time is missed for a variety of things, and based on last year, we averaged 35 minutes a day for math instruction, and it's not enough to address a rigorous math curriculum in that amount of time. When you look at it in terms of actual days, we're somewhere between 4 and 39 days fewer than our DIRG counterparts. We'd like to fix that. Our approach to doing that is to bring together a building-based committee with the task of finding alternatives that will provide additional instructional time. It's really important because insufficient instructional time does 2 things. Not only does it preclude us from addressing all the key content that students need to see, but it also prevents teachers from teaching for depth and understanding. And skimming over content, which is what results when you have insufficient instructional time, really weakens a student's ability to tackle more complex topics later on. So that's one of the weak legs in our foundation. The other side of the instructional time is looking at level 1 students at the high school, where there's some baked-in instructional learning gaps for those students. We want to, and have begun the process of looking into a structure that's similar to the AIM program at the middle school. We know quality instruction, additional quality instruction works. We saw that with AIM. Some of the students at AIM saw growth rates in their math performance on the order of 150%. So we're looking into the ways in which that can be implemented at the high school, targeting the level 1 students.
And would that be for freshmen, or would it go beyond those grade levels? Okay.
Yeah, to start with those kids. Some of those students will come to the high school having been in the AIM program at the middle school, so they will have experienced it, they'll know it. We'll see, we can run it on a pilot level, see how it works. And just like at Middlebrook, I don't think we really see this as a long-term thing. This is an approach to fill some gaps. We want to prevent those gaps from occurring, and that's what's behind the other parts of the plan. Okay. There we go. Okay, now let's start to talk about sequence. We've seen this slide before. I have a feeling we're going to live in this slide and the subsequent 2 or 3 slides, and that's fine because this is really the meat of what's behind our recommendation around course sequence. This is probably the most consequential of the 3 recommendations, and I want to make sure everybody's happy with what our understandings are, what the data means. Because we've approached acceleration, I would say over the last 12 years, by skipping critical content, principally in 6th grade. That content is ratio, proportions, proportional reasoning. Those topics are foundational for success in algebra and higher level math. So we sort of adopted an acceleration approach that many schools in the area have also adopted, which is skipping content in order to enable students to take algebra in 7th grade. It really does create learning gaps for students. This chart, and when we gathered this data, I really wanted to have 4, 5, 6 years worth of data, so that's why we looked at the students who took Algebra 1 as 7th graders. Where did they go and what did they do and how successful were they? At the end of pre-calculus in 10th grade, 43% of the students who were in Algebra 1 as 7th graders did not remain in that path. What does that mean? That means they were no longer in an honors level course. Most of those movements out of the honors level occurred after middle school because there isn't another course for them to go to in middle school, and that's totally appropriate. If a student's not successful in algebra in 7th grade, most of the time we'd recommend that they retake algebra in 8th grade. They can't move to another course. So students who struggle or are just sort of keeping up will make the move from the honors course to the level 2 course at the high school. We have small numbers of students who change levels during the year, 2, 3, 4, both at the freshman level and at the sophomore level, but most of those transitions occur between school years. And I think it's also important to look at what does that mean. It might seem like a level change isn't a big deal, but it really is for those kids. And that doesn't fix the gaps that cause them to shift and change levels. Those gaps still remain. Merely by changing from an honors level to a level 2 class doesn't make up for the content that they missed that caused the problem to begin with. The performance and the fallout and the movement of students is even more stark when you consider how many students remain in this pathway for junior year. I mean, that was always sort of the goal of taking algebra in 7th grade, was to enable students to get to BC calculus as juniors in high school. And only 25% of the students do that. So 75% of those kids in that 7th grade algebra do not go on to take BC calculus in high school. It's a relatively small number of students and a lot of energy, and I feel bad for the students. Anyway, so the goal here is twofold. It's to provide students with the foundation to be successful in high school, and at the end of the day, to open up more pathways, enable more students to be able to access those advanced courses in high school. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the subsequent slides. Good. Okay, so let's talk about course sequence. Some of this is a repeat. The reasons that we're doing this, again, is to shore up that foundation of learning so that students can be successful. The other side of the coin, so to speak, that we need to address and look at is how students are enrolled and what courses students are enrolled in. And the data up on the slide just comes from this year, and it gives you a sense of where students are when they're taking math courses. So 77% of the students in Accelerated Math 6 were overrides into that course. Effectively meaning there's really no difference between our grade 6 math and Accelerated 6 math. 38% of the students in pre-algebra 6 are overrides. And we had more than 100 overrides at the high school. So that has to be addressed along with looking at the course sequence. So what are we doing to the course sequence? We're going to look at it in two parts. We're going to look at what happens at middle school, and then we'll look at what happens at high school. So Part 1 really is based on delaying acceleration from grade 6 to grade 7. This is an approach that's supported by and advocated for by the framers of the Common Core. The Common Core strongly recommends against trying to accelerate, particularly by skipping content in 6th grade, because that year is so pivotal. They also are strongly supportive of an approach that utilizes compressed courses. Compressed or condensed courses you'll see in our sequence. The first one is the Pre-Algebra 7 course. We've called it Pre-Algebra 7 to identify it as the course that precedes algebra. It's a compressed course that incorporates 7th and 8th grade math. There's a trajectory and a pathway for doing that stipulated by the Common Core. Now, who does that? In our DERG, there are 2 districts that do not offer geometry in middle school. Ridgefield's one of them, and Eastern Reading is the other. Many of the New York Westchester schools do not offer geometry in middle school. Many of the Massachusetts schools do not offer geometry in middle school for exactly this reason. There's been a huge amount of work done in the state of California, and they've gone even one step further and do not even provide algebra in middle school anymore. They start high school with algebra. Kind of that's how it was when I was in high school. But so the question of skipping content, compressing courses, and providing students with a strong foundation in mathematics is something that's being looked at across the country. Now, you might ask, we currently have 3 levels of grade 6 math, so we're going from 3 levels to 1. So how does that work? Why is that good for students? I have a 6th grade teacher here, and I don't think I'm speaking, I'm not speaking out of school here by saying they strongly advocate this approach. I think all the teachers believe they are far better suited to address the needs of students, a range of needs in one class, than they are preparing for 3 different levels, many of which, oftentimes students are not well placed. The approach that we take really starts with a pre-assessment and identifying where students are. Using that pre-assessment, they target instruction based on where students are. They scaffold the work and provide challenging problems for students who are ready to entertain that challenge. We are also at the same time exploring curriculum materials from something called illustrative math. And I don't know that if you've ever heard of illustrative math. It's an open source curriculum. Means it's freely available online. They do a wonderful job of embedding highly student-centered instruction into their lessons and a range of scaffolded problems. They call them novice problems all the way through challenge problems. Each of the middle school grade level groups are looking at the materials. The 6th grade is going to pilot a unit shortly and see how they like it, to see how it works. That's something that would very much supplement the materials that we have through the Math in Focus program. Now, the other point I would make is that especially at the 6th grade level, you find students who are really good at some things in math and not as good at other things. So to sort of accelerate them and identify them based on being really good at computations doesn't necessarily meet the needs they might have for more support in something like geometry. So it really is a better placement for 6th grade students to be in one class where the teacher can provide the appropriate challenge and personalized instruction. Part 2. It looks more complicated. But you've all seen this chart before, but there's 2 things that are really important that I want to emphasize. The course selection choices that are available today for all juniors and seniors will not change. Those will remain exactly as they are today. What will change is the pathways to get there. And by taking this approach, we're providing more opportunities for students to access those advanced courses in high school with a better foundation. Currently, we have, if you look at the two boxes, pre-algebra, which is 8th grade math, and algebra 1, currently about 48% of our students take algebra in middle school. 52% are in that pre-algebra class, so it's roughly half and half. I would easily see that ratio flip and increase in favor of students taking algebra in middle school because we're providing the foundation for them to tackle that work. To look at it, and this addresses some of the questions maybe indirectly that we got, but if you look at the pre-algebra 8th grade classes, I would say that, no, I want to make sure that we really address this and make, and if there's any other questions, you know, by all means, we should talk about them. If you look at that 50%, I would envision that even if only a third of them fall into the category of the student for whom the Algebra 1 geometry course is designed, that would bump that ratio up significantly. And that's what that course is designed for. For the students, let me just take a step back. 8th grade math was deliberately designed by the Common Core framers to incorporate some Algebra 1 material. So those 8th graders are already getting Algebra 1 content as 8th graders. For students who do really well, who master the content easily, they don't really need to see that content again in Algebra 1 in high school. In addition, there is rigorous high school level geometry content that's embedded in the middle school 7th grade and 8th grade courses. So having done well in those courses, those students would be ready to push further along in their geometry learning. And that's why that Algebra 1 geometry course is created. There's pathways out for students for whom that's not successful. And again, the other opportunities that exist now, we have a certain number of students who double up sophomore year with geometry and algebra 2. However, I suspect that the student for whom that Algebra 1 geometry course is designed would be the same student who would be well positioned to double up sophomore year. So this may well kind of replace the need to double up, although certainly if a student wanted to, they could. Looking at the Algebra 1 in 8th grade, those are the kids who would have historically been in that double accelerated pathway. For the students who do really well, strong performance, nail the algebra, they would probably be recommended for the 3 and 2, which is 2 years of math, or we do geometry, algebra 2, and pre-calculus. Interestingly, that's exactly the place where the framers of the Common Core recommend compacting. The two big places are 7 and 8, and some form of algebra 2 and pre-calculus, and or algebra 1 geometry, and we've kind of combined them. So I'd like to say we're creative and we came up with these ideas, but we really didn't. We borrowed them from other places. Weston is running an algebra 1 geometry course. Ridgefield runs, this is their second or third year, where they're doing an algebra 2 pre-calculus course. Katona-Lewisboro does a 3 and 2 years of geometry, algebra 2, and pre-calculus. That model is also being adopted by schools at San Francisco Unified School District and through different parts of California.
So it's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No.
It's compacted, it's not 3 courses in 2 years.
No, it's compacted. And
It's 2 courses that cover 3 subjects in 2
it's
years.
one course. It's one course.
One course.
that
It covers
includes
3
content.
subjects over 2
But
years.
it's taught over 2 years.
Over 2 years.
Right.
Over the span of 2 years.
Yes.
Right, so you're not taking 3 courses, you're still taking 1 course, but it covers 3 topics.
Correct.
Over 2 years?
Over 2 years.
Yes. Over 2 years. There you go. Let me move ahead.
Would a student have the same teacher the 2 years?
Yes, we're envisioning it, structuring it that way, so the 3 and 2 for 2 years. Now, would it work that way? I think so. We've talked about it, and we feel like it flows better, the connection would be better for one teacher to stay with that one course for the 2 years.
But you can't guarantee my classmates would be the same. Because
probably can't
scheduling
guarantee
wise,
that
right,
with
Yeah, I think you have schedule,
I mean,
it
a big
depends.
chunk of them would be,
Right.
but not
Are
necessarily.
we gonna have two sections or 3 sections? That if there's only one section, then it pretty much is
Right.
guaranteed.
Right.
You also might have students who decide, and you'll see that line that goes from the turquoise box up to the Algebra 2 box. You may have students who decide they don't
After the
wanna
first year or
maintain this
something,
pace, and they would get credit for geometry after 1 year and then move into Algebra 2 and follow the same progression that they would have.
Judy, can I just ask a question? So the Algebra 1, 8th graders who are taking Algebra 1, then some will be recommended for the 3 and 2 class. How will that be decided? Because won't they have all learned the same? Is it by mastery, like how they've demonstrated mastery, or is it just?
We'll
Like-
look at multiple data trends,
Okay.
just as we want to do for any course placement. We'll look at grades in the course, we'll look at any kind of screening, universal screening, MAP test, PSAT test, and then we plan to develop validation exams,
Okay.
which will, notice I didn't say placement exam, validation exams that validate mastery of the topics that a student needs to be successful in that course.
Thank you.
Usually it should be.
Well, right, I know. It's okay to clarify it.
Can I ask a question about,
Do you want me to go back?
yeah, just,
Okay.
okay, so in 8th grade, if you're in pre-algebra and or algebra, those would be the 2 choices?
Correct.
For everybody?
Yeah.
So they're in one or the other in 8th
Correct.
grade?
Yeah.
And you're anticipating that even more students would end up in Algebra 1 than than we have now?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you know my main concern is
Yes.
just going backwards, that I want to be sure that students entering college are just as well prepared in terms of advanced math as they ever were, and preferably even more so. So, you know, I'm really heartened to see that this looks like exactly what everybody's trying to get at, but by building a better foundation earlier in grade
Right.
6.
And in doing so, students will be more successful.
Right, and then they can launch more easily.
Right.
All right, so my only question though is if you are taking pre-algebra in grade 8, isn't it gonna be a little, I don't know, challenging to take algebra 1 and geometry in grade 9 versus the other students who have algebra in grade 8 taking just geometry? Does that make, is that?
No, I
it's a
understand
dumb
what you're saying.
question, But yeah,
and
it's
I'm
like, that
gonna
looks
address-
like a harder thing to do than
It seems
just
like
taking
it's
straight
two subjects,
geometry.
why wouldn't it be harder, right?
Right.
And that's the nature of compacting courses. What makes them work is kind of 2 or 3 kind of really big ideas. One is we leverage prior learning. What does that mean? That means that in the case of the Algebra 1 geometry course, I'm going to use a geometry context or a geometry situation to teach algebra. So, I'll give you an example. There's 180 degrees in a triangle. If I'm teaching geometry to a student who struggles more, I might say, this angle is 45 degrees, this angle is 30 degrees. What's the measure of the third angle? In a compressed or compacted Algebra 1 geometry course, I might say, one angle is equal to x plus 6. The other angle is equal to x. The third angle is equal to 3x. Find the measure of all the angles. And that's the way of infusing algebra or using a geometry context to learn algebra. So yes, but let me just shift if I can. We can go
Oh,
back to
absolutely.
this
Yeah,
slide.
no.
But
You
what I
have the
wanted to
flow.
do is
Yep.
spend a little bit more time on how the pieces fit together. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, maybe before we move forward, I want to go back to Middlebrook just for a second before we get too far past.
Okay.
6th grade. Individualized instruction. I'm concerned about because clearly there are students who are above and beyond. The sixth grade teachers, how do you think, or do you feel comfortable that you would be able to instruct in a challenging way when you have only one course you're offering, all the students in the classroom are taking this one course, yet you clearly identify and can clearly point out or recognize who can excel? Are you comfortable that you'll be able to individualize the instruction for those students to keep them challenged and moving forward? It concerns me. It always has.
It's a great question. In looking at some of our changes in curriculum, we've been finding that when students rush through, they get a surface level learning and they forget it. Versus a student who dives deep into that and is challenged into the material is starting to recognize that and retain this information and apply it to a greater degree. So the whole class could be talking about the same topic, but within that, students are analyzing problems on varying degrees and having conversations with like groups and sometimes with whole groups. So it's a variety of homogeneous and heterogeneous grouping that you have to balance. And much of that is based on the pretest, but the best way to really understand material is to get into it and to be able to explain it. So we know we've been exploring different options for journaling and different ways to have students communicate that they can understand and they can think through and they can explain and analyze their knowledge versus just doing the problem. So it is a challenge, you're right. It's finding the resources and being creative in coming up with those variety, but I would venture to say it would be a lot more meaningful to do that with one course than to try to be scattered with 3 courses with a variety of kids who aren't really qualified to be in that level course anyway.
Okay, well, it makes sense, but I'm just concerned if you feel comfortable being able to meet the needs of that. You could divide the classroom into thirds. This third of this classes, if they're above and beyond, they're ready to go, move forward. You got the middle classes running, you got a class over here that really needs some such time. All in one classroom, all studying the same thing at the same time. It concerns me that we're going to be able to address all those needs, sufficiently or properly, and you feel comfortable in being able to do that.
It's somewhat like what Trudy mentioned with that geometry problem with the triangle.
Okay.
It's differentiating that way, and we do have ample resources with our coaches and our coordinator too to help us through. We will definitely need some summer time and some creative thought, but I think it's definitely possible.
All right, and I think expanding the classroom time is critical in being successful in being able to do that. 31 minutes in a period, of instruction time, we'll never be able to accomplish that. I mean, it's clear, I don't think you would ever be able to get that done well at all. Okay, all right.
But we're also, we're not just throwing you all into the 6th grade math class, right? Won't there be summer work and professional development?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, just to piggyback on Glenn's question one more time, is while 40% of the students you don't feel are optimally able to start the pre-algebra, algebra, geometry sequence in middle school, having said that, 57% of them are. So it's those high flyers that I guess was Glenn's question as well.
Right.
The kids who are being successful now, parent overrides and maturity levels and all of that aside.
Right.
There have been students who have been successful. So I guess we're all concerned about, we do not want to hinder them or bore them or, any of the things you might hear, just how do we keep them challenged? So that's, when you go from 3 levels to 1 level, that will be sort of the question.
There's a little bit of a paradigm shift going on here in terms of instruction. And I think historically, we've all thought about advancement involves taking the next step the next step in the sequence, rather than spending time going more deeply into the math that exists. I could share with you, and I would invite you if you want to, I'd be happy to do so. I could share with you a range of materials that, quite honestly, I have to think about, that is targeted 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. It's really rich. You can take a number, very simply, an example, two problems, a number of digits under a square root equals something else under a square root. Using the digits 1 through 9, arrange them to get the smallest, to get them as close to possible as equal. You can do the same thing with do a difference. Fill in the digits and find the smallest difference between these two numbers. That's incredibly rich, incredibly thoughtful, and I would argue would challenge any student. We have not historically, and I don't mean we in Wilton, I mean we globally, particularly in the US, have not really pushed that part of math learning for our students. And that's one thing that if you want to do a comparison, that's one thing that countries like Singapore and Finland do well. They don't even teach algebra until high school. So the idea that we sort of adopted, that the way we provide advancement for students is by teaching them or showing them the next topic in the sequence, I think has proven to be flawed. And there are many rich opportunities to engage students without rushing them through the course sequence. And I'm confident that the teachers at Middlebrook, especially the 6th grade teachers and 7th grade teachers who will be doing a lot of that personalization, are more than capable of doing that.
Well, I also think that there's, you talk about a paradigm shift, that there's a lot of parent education and
Agreed.
understanding. And so as a board, we're always thinking about, well, how's the public, and, are we responsible and responsive to their concerns? So explaining that fast coverage or, sort of racing through topics is not the same as, I think, the more comparisons and talk about the depth and even talk about Singapore and all of that, because, ultimately we want to be assured that our kids are going to sit in the weirdest, geekiest engineering course in college,
if that's their passion, yes.
And they're going to be as well prepared, if not better,
Right.
than anybody else.
Right.
So I think that's the goal.
I agree.
Is to, prepare those for that kind of thinking, which doesn't necessarily have to mean
My son is
course
really good.
titles.
Right, no, and agreed. The other thing, go ahead, did you, go ahead.
That's
my job,
Bit about,
Sorry.
If you go back to the slide from high school,
Yes.
and we had 3 levels in 2 year, you know what we currently have in 6th grade? 3 levels in 1 year.
That's a good point. You're exactly right.
That is called pre-algebra 6. And you think this is hard. Sit in my seat for a while. 3 in 1 year. We're not suggesting that. We realize that that is a recipe for disaster. And we want kids to be passionate about something that they might already naturally have a propensity for. And we think our current model squelches that passion from all of those kids who didn't make it along the way. We'd rather a growth model than a too bad you didn't make it model. If Trudy, back on that slide that you were just on,
Right, okay.
this
Yes,
is
sir.
what Debbie was just alluding to, is for parent education. If we all think back to when we took algebra at one point in our lives, and you look at the list in pre-algebra, that may be what you remember when you took algebra, because the Common Core has changed.
It is a chore.
I like the trademark yelling by the way. It has changed everything. So this was the pre-algebra that all of the adults in this room and in their houses right now remember as their algebra. And guess what your kids are asked to take now in algebra? It's a little harder.
Yeah.
So, but again, I think the more we can help
Right.
parents understand that, because many of us are old school or old school. So
No.
it's a shift.
You're right.
Yeah. The other, go ahead.
No, I just was gonna say that And it's, parent education is gonna be really important. We're going to be seeing, the board is gonna be seeing this a lot in the future, and so I was just
Agreed.
aware of the time, and we still have to get to the budget. And
Right.
so I think it's important that we understand and ask questions, but we also, this won't be the last time that we see it.
Right.
And we're not gonna be, tonight's just not the night.
Yeah,
I
okay,
agree with you,
sorry
Debbie.
about
No, I agree. But I just feel like that's another discussion, the parent part of it. Does that make, and so I'm not trying to,
That's
stop
fine.
questions. I just, we need to get, I want to hear more about.
Recognize. Just very quickly, you can see by the color coding, that's where there's overlap in content. So that's how we're able to achieve this marriage of Algebra 1 and Geometry in one course for those students, the same students who are able to handle a 7th and 8th grade compacted math course. The other side of that is the 3 and 2 course. And here again, slightly different approach, but I just wanted to emphasize that the approach to Algebra 2 and Pre-Calculus, there are so many overlaps. At their heart, both courses are about the study of functions. So if we kind of integrate that approach, we can achieve the synergies in a good, kind of thorough, compacted course that addresses topics that appear historically both in Algebra 2 and Pre-Calculus. Benefits. Again, the goal here is to provide middle school students with the foundations that they need to be successful in high school. The other thought that I would add in this sort of reflection on the benefits is that student options shouldn't begin and end in middle school for math. We should be providing more opportunities for students to make decisions and enter different pathways outside of middle school. And that's part of, to address kind of the parent issue. I think parents get concerned about where my student's going to be when they graduate from high school. I think the beauty of this approach is that it does provide other opportunities for students when they are ready to engage in those opportunities. The 3 components that kind of come together, how we're going to support the teachers, principally through our coaching to help scale the best instructional practices, program days, which help us align the curriculum and curriculum units, and in collaborative planning time, where teachers can make use of looking at student work to base their instructional decisions on. Implementation timeline. We deliberately are looking at a 5-year approach to this, with this year being the planning for change year. And again, at least in terms of rewriting some of the curriculum units, we've already begun that work. The plan would be to launch the 6th grade class next year. No other changes. Students who are currently in 6th grade would pursue the same pathways that exist today. So in the year 2021, 7th grade would be introduced. 21-22 would be the final change to that 8th grade, and then 22-23, when that cohort has phased, has gone all the way through middle school, is when they would reach the high school and begin the courses, the Algebra 1 Geometry and the 3 and 2 course. In each year, we'll be planning and preparing for the change in the preceding year.
That's the frustrating part. It's going to take.
I know, I want it to be tomorrow too, but.
Well,
We
it's
get-
the frustrating part, but it's also,
The right way to do it. That's the only way
it's
to
the
do it.
right way to go, and it's also good news, I think, from a parent perspective, that it's not immediate change that's all going to be dumped on them come this September, but that it's a gradual implementation of the new.
And more
course.
importantly, we'll have time to check ourselves along the way.
Exactly.
And,
It's the wise approach, yeah.
But to Debbie's point, I guess I didn't focus on the fact that Math 6 was going to change in the fall, so we don't have that much time.
Right.
For parent. So is there a plan in terms of?
yes,
Okay.
there is, starting here. Our plan is to get to all the building faculties in some way, shape, or form With this presentation, we're working on building a resource file, digital resource file with research materials that everyone will have access to, everyone who's interested in exploring the materials. We'll follow that with coordinated presentations with the PTA and then sort of broader community-wide 2 daytime, two evening sessions and that's going to be this presentation is going to be a core component of that, but we will be eliciting feedback, soliciting questions from those who have attended and plan to attend so that they can be addressed at each of the sessions.
We could even think maybe about a narrated PowerPoint post for people.
I think that would be a great idea too. We could start with this even and narrate this, so anyone who's not able to be at a meeting can access it. And
Couple questions. First, how confident are you that this summer we'll be able to completely finish curriculum development for the new grade 6 math? Will it be 100% ready day one, or will it be continuously developed as the year goes on?
I'm highly confident that starting when the students come back in August, we'll be ready for them.
Okay. You mentioned something, you said something about AIM being a limited time thing. Now, did you mean that from a student perspective, that their participation in AIM would be limited, or we as a school system will only have that program for a short time?
I think the idea with AIM was that we were using it to fill existing learning gaps, with our ultimate goal being not to create the gaps in the first place. So both in terms of students, ideally, I would see students cycling through AIM, and when they reach a level of proficiency, they no longer need that support. So yes, in terms of the individual students, but also as a district, I would hope that we would have a day when we don't need AIM.
Well, certainly by the time 22, 23, as this
And
sixth grade cohort gets
that's the
there,
intent,
AIM
yes.
will be gone.
Yes. Okay.
When will the increase in instruction?
We have to, I would love to say it will be ready to launch next year, but we may need another year in order to structure that. We're going to start working on that now.
That's critical to what we're doing.
Well, yes, and that's exactly why we say in the presentation, all three components, no one component will yield the results that the three together will.
Right, it just wasn't on your implementation timeline, so I just thought maybe kind of.
I think there is a line in the middle, I think, yeah, this small font, sorry.
And I would just say that it seems to me that the parent, student, and maybe even more so parent, paradigm shift is going to be your greatest challenge. And so if I was on your team, that's where I would put my focus, is how do we make that paradigm shift with the parent community?
And of course, the Sutter Milks is the 5th grade parents who are with parent.
Well, I think, yeah, how you message it, obviously, you have the skills for that. But as a board member, my original concern was, like, how can you slow down middle school and still end up doing all these wonderful things in high school? And you've shown us. And so I think the challenge would be to say, our kids are going to be doing slightly or a lot different middle school, but the results will be they can leverage that in high school, and even more will be more successful. Right. And I just think that's the thing to hold on to.
Because, yeah, I heard a speaker once that said something to the effect, and I hope I'm quoting him correctly, from the UConn, I think, who said, and if you don't take algebra in grade 9, grade 9, camera, grade 9.
Correction.
And it's Prussian.
She's already misquoted.
I've already misquoted. But he was making the argument for how much math and science instruction in high school can affect careers.
Yes.
And his plea or his case was, if you don't take algebra by grade 9, sorry, it's not grade 8, that you don't have much hope of getting into the medical profession. You know, just given everything else that's going on and all the sequencing that has to fall into place.
Right.
So again, I don't want parents to
panic. I want them to realize that actually by the time you get to high school, these kids will be better prepared, more flexible, more pathways leading into different math courses.
And that's exactly the goal
Yeah.
that we try to achieve.
Yeah, so I just think that's so critical.
And I think there are a lot of parents out there who would say, who, the last 5 or 6 years are well aware of what their kids, why this isn't better.
Well, and I think that the explanation of how you've been sort of surface teaching and that this course is really going to go more in depth is really going to, I think that's really where the parents need to have a better understanding of what's been happening and why and what's going to happen going forward.
Or just that list of topics that pre-algebra is really algebra.
Yeah, right, that too.
It is, it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
No small topic. Sorry, Laura.
No, I.
That's why you're here, Deb.
If we were in one of our lower schools,
Yeah.
we would stand up and take a brain break.
I think we should. So Debbie, I was just trying to balance my exhaustion, yeah.
No, I got you.
I know, I agree. But I do think that that's not going to be the end of the math discussion.
No.
Yeah. Okay, now we're moving on to review and discuss the superintendent's proposed 2019-2020 budget.
It's that time of year again. So, given the time on the clock, I'll also do some compacting. But we're going to start slow to go fast. I'd like to thank our entire administrative team, their support staff, our teachers and teacher leaders, all who had a hand in shaping the proposal you received over the weekend and are going to learn more about right now. I also want to take a particular second to recognize Ann Kelly Lenz, who ought to come to work with a cape, because she's a superhero, and her partner downstairs, Marianne Salvato, who works in our business office, ought to wear a cape too, because they are truly magical. They've committed countless hours of analysis and preparation, culminating in this final proposal. So, Ann, thank you, and thank you to Marianne as well. I want to take 4 to 5 minutes to set context. Any of you familiar with VUCA? Okay, we're going to learn something new. This is great.
How'd you get on that rock?
I got in trouble with my wife again.
And no boat to get off that
And no boat.
A stream without a paddle.
Anything else, the music will keep your eyes open. Right, so VUCA. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. As the video captured, these are the new workplace and global realities that our students and graduates experience. In response to a VUCA world, the World Economic Forum published its top 10 job skills for 2020. Take a look at the list. Rounding out the top 3 are complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. Among the remaining 10 include service orientation, emotional intelligence, and cognitive flexibility. Does it remind you of any school district's vision by any chance? Let's take a look. So this is our current vision. We haven't adopted a new vision. It is under construction, and while that is certainly true, the core concepts and beliefs are constant. And I think our vision clearly reflects those skills in the World Economic Forum's top 10. So a little more context. Sometimes it can be hard to describe how instruction is informed by VUCA and how those 21st century skills are actually embedded. I was introduced to this chart just yesterday, and I think it's both simplistic but a brilliant example of how we are trying to hack instruction to teach 21st century skills. Take a look at the activity description in the yellow first. This is a sample series of lessons around civil rights. So the descriptions you see in the yellow, first reading in the left-hand side and then on the right-hand side, that's how the product might be presented, is a fairly classical approach to teaching about civil rights leaders, civil rights events, etc. If you read up the chart and focus on the red, you can see those VUCA skills clearly reflected in the new and more rigorous cognitive demands presented in that approach. One of the greatest shifts when you move up the chart is where the locus of control exists. So kind of in the yellow classical instructional approach, that's the dominant paradigm we live in today that we're trying to get out of, where teachers own most of the control and the decision making, and there's not serious consideration to given to voice and audience, to the red example that really lives with the decision making at the student level. I think it's another example of how we instructionally are trying to shift here, and I also think it underscores why we as a district are so committed to both professional learning and instructional coaching. Make sense? So you're familiar with our strategic objectives. I just offer these as a reminder that our strategies are designed to promote the lesson design that you saw in the red description. Our goal through the objectives is to tweak the architecture so that by design, students have much greater voice and agency throughout their learning experiences in our schools. That's the context for our spending priorities. That's the big picture and the why of the direction that we're seeking to move into and that we're actually moving into. So now on to the fun stuff, the budget. Earlier in the year, we adopted some budget goals. You'll notice the red check mark because I think that this budget proposal achieves each of those goals. We propose to provide adequate funding to maintain and improve the quality of our system, to fund major priorities including an alternative program for high school students as well as a secondary coordinator for special education. We continue to target investments to advance our strategic objectives, to adhere to our guidelines for class size, as well as maintain investment in professional learning.
We also have funds embedded in the proposal to address the capital improvement plan, as well as year 3 of our digital learning plan. And we have met the target of the Board of Finance's budget guidance of 1.6%. I just won't read through all of these. You have them. These are the assumptions that guided the budget development. We are committed to finding cost efficiencies. It goes without saying that we honor state and federal mandates. We have contracts whose increases we need to honor, and the costs of many things are going up, with the exception perhaps of medical insurance, which has been the great gift of this budget season. So here's our proposal. $82,983,607, an increase of just a hair over $1.1 million, or 1.35%, which is a full quarter point below the Board of Finance's guidance. Do you want to continue? We'll stop there. So a few more details. Go ahead.
The big question is,
You're going to
They
throw
gave
me
us
off my
one
whole
point.
presentation. Go ahead.
no, they gave us 1.65, was it, I guess, as guidance, or 1.60?
1.6.
Yeah. 1.6. Could we spend the other money? Is there a need?
I'm going to speak for all public school superintendents everywhere. We've never met a dollar that we haven't wanted to spend.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
I just want to say, at the outset, it's wonderful. This is great, and obviously, we've gone through it and we've seen the details, so it's solid. I mean, it's really a good budget. But to push back, are there things that we're not doing that we should be doing?
I think you'll have ample opportunity next week when we meet with each of the principals. You can certainly hear from me and my perspective. I think it's richer to hear from the principals. We always, and I think you know this to be true, we always make choices, and we make choices for a variety of reasons. Could we always do more? I think it goes without saying, of course we can always do more. We're not always ready to do more, and so we do have reasons why we defer opportunities and investments.
Well, we had this discussion last year, too, at the same time.
Yes.
The question's raised. I just want to make sure that we are really critically thinking about the things that we really need to be doing, and are there things that we are skipping on or passing on that would really move us forward to meeting our mission and our objectives.
Right.
I think if you can do the things that you checked off.
Yep.
That just as in years where sometimes the guidance is too low and we say, but this is the budget we need. This year it works a little differently. We're still saying, and this is the budget we need.
That's right.
So I understand.
Yep, and we operate in a climate where scarce resources are scarce. I'm channeling our 6th grade math teacher. Where resources are scarce. Right. Let's try that a few times. And both locally at the state level and certainly at the federal level. So I think, it just, again, it speaks to the complexity of the environment in which we're operating and trying to achieve our goals. This, just a breakout of where we're spending. That distribution really doesn't change dramatically year over year. I think you know this already. The vast majority of our resources are committed to our staff. We're a people industry, and we require people to meet our vision and objectives, and so we spend money on people. We'll spend a few minutes just on variances. I think you'll note that the most notable unfavorable variances occur in salaries and professional services. That's where we see the largest increases. Our significantly favorable variances occur in benefits and other purchase services, and it's those two lines that allowed us to come in at such a conservative place. So very briefly and by summary at the line level, in the 1,000 salary series, that increase is driven primarily by contracted increases as well as new FTE proposals, which we'll talk about in just a minute. In the insurance and employee benefits line, that was the gift of this budget.
We have really favorable claims history and also reduced annual required contributions to OPEB and the pension trust. So the value there is high. We were able to lower our annual contributions. In professional services, that line is increasing. The increases are tied up around technology, training and conferences, and a small portion dedicated to IEEs in our special education budget. On property services, we have a couple of significant items. We've been working through a capital improvement plan. There's a drain repair that's a six-figure proposal at Middlebrook, and we're trying to keep up with the painting around the district and to keep our buildings looking fresh and clean. The other good news line was around other purchase services, and that was driven by a few different factors: reduction in public tuition. We closed out some costly settlements, so there's some one-time savings there. And Andrea's staff has literally looked under every rock and stone to find grant reimbursement money. And so that was the third area that led to a reduction in that line. Along other supplies and materials, that's really the increase is driven by digital resources, some supplies for the alternative school proposal, and our diesel fuel lives in that line. That was a $60,000 increase year over year. The equipment line, there were really not too much to talk about there, no major changes. And then under dues and fees, one new subscription and then some other kind of standard increases. I think, the other news of the budget is around FTE. And so despite the rather modest year-over-year increase, the proposal does request additional staffing. As you already know, I'm proposing adding a full-time special education administrator. I've left a written proposal at your place, which I'd like to address more thoroughly with you when we have our special education workshop next week. We're also requesting staff to support an alternative school. The board will hear a formal presentation on January 31st. Beyond those, this budget proposes 2.0 non-certified job coaches for the 18 to 21 program, an addition of one certified kindergarten teacher, an addition of a half-time pre-kindergarten teacher, and two half-time pre-K paraprofessionals. The proposal there to address the annual increase in students that age in over the course of the year is to open a sixth classroom during the second half of next year. We've been monitoring those numbers pretty closely right now, and we're teetering on the edge of needing to open a sixth class this year. If you recall, in the past year, we opened a fifth class. So the pattern continues, and we started with a higher enrollment back in September. Additionally, we're budgeting in the 0.3 Director of Digital Learning. We made that change this year, and athletics is requesting a 0.5 athletic trainer. So budget to budget, this represents an increase of 7.5 FTE. However, actual to budget, it represents an increase of 5.09. As I noted, the bulk of the increase is in special services and reflects proposals for new or expanded programming, the alternative school and additional coaches for the 18 to 21 program. So over the next several weeks, we'll spend much more time discussing these individual, but I would like to note for the board that from a financial perspective, we're looking at additional special services staffing really as opportunities for longer-term cost avoidance. And I'll illustrate that with a simple and recent example. In the 2 years that the Community Steps program has run, we've estimated that we've avoided approximately $300,000 in tuition costs because we've kept our students here rather than paid to send them elsewhere. We think that the alternative school will offer a similar opportunity over time. Make sense? And you can just see, looking at the slide, you have it in front of you. We had a few modest reductions, so a reduction of 0.4. The teacher of hearing impaired, we just have fewer students. Very slight reduction in OT-PT, reduction of a paraprofessional, and then reduction of the 2.0 tech support, and as has been our practice when we've had retirements, we've outsourced that work, so that's reflected with a slight increase in the Novus contract, which is picked up in a different line. So again, just briefly, working through some of the key lines. Salaries are going up 1.9 million. The contracted increases for the WEA, those are really the grid changes, step and level. WASA, that's the administrator contract. The average increase was just over 2%. UPSU was anywhere from 2 to 2.3. That's a new contract. The custodians were up 2%. And then the proposed new FTE in this budget reflect just under $600,000 in new salary spending. As I mentioned before, in our 2000 line, the medical claims history over the last couple of years has been very, very good, so we've been able to take that down line substantially. And then because the OPEB and pension trust values have increased, our payment has decreased. And 3000, that increase is driven by technology contracts, our Novus contract. Novus handles all of our buckets and wires, IT infrastructure support. That group is led by Eric Hawkinson, who you've met numerous times. We also have numerous Power School. That's our student database contract increases. Training and conferences, there's quite a long list. As you know, we started this year with Miller Driscoll, more fully participating in the Teachers College Readers Writers Project. We're slated to have Cider Mill sign on next year. We have money set aside for ruler training. There are a couple of Kids in Crisis contracts. Those are some of our support interventionists that work at the high school in that budget. And then, as I mentioned before, we spend, I think, about $80,000 annually on IEEs. On the 4000 line, I mentioned the Middlebrook drain. We're also doing locker room tile replacement in the girls' locker room. We have painting projects all over the district. Right now, in this current year, we will be finishing off ceiling tile and lighting upgrade at Cider Mill. We have a bathroom partition replacement project at Middlebrook, again painting, and then the other big one is the sprinkler head replacement at the high school. Under other purchase services, that was the three pieces I mentioned before: reduction in public tuition, the wonderful work with the grant that Andrea's staff has undertaken, and then closing out a couple of settlements. Supplies and materials, digital resources, transportation, supplies for alternative school. The equipment line, there's not a lot to talk about here, but this is, new printers. It just runs the gamut on this line, the belts and things like that for the maintenance. What else is on that line?
General
Equipment. I think that what I'd like to note for the dues and fees line, this year we'll be purchasing a NAAC membership. That's an early childhood program, and we're looking to begin the accreditation process for our preschool over the next couple of years. So we've had priorities, key priorities in place for several years. This year, we're carrying those priorities forward. You are intimately aware with all of them. So we're implementing our digital learning plan year 3. We continue our school climate improvement work. We continue to focus on strengthening collaborative practice, implementing our action plans for improving reading and writing and mathematics. We saw earlier in the year our action plans for introducing universal design, as well as the performance assessment. So all that work will continue. And as well, we're keying in on Tier 1 and 2 intervention support at Wilton High School. Earlier this year, you adopted 4 new high school courses. Debbie, your favorite was data structures and algorithms, if I recall. Alongside that, we have executive functioning for high school and beyond. revised United States history course and the peer leadership course, which I think we're all looking forward to. So on the note of enrollment, K-12 in the classroom, we're expecting, projecting rather, 3,835 students. You can see if you look across the decade, we are going to, we have been and we will continue to see a decline in total student enrollment. What that amounts to year over year is a net loss of 35 students K-12. I indicated already that it's our intention to add a 13th section at kindergarten. Pre-K, we're projecting to start the year with 64 students. We anticipate we'll have about 33 outplay students, and community steps will grow to 10 students, which will give us a district total enrollment of 3,942 students. Just a quick note about class size averages. We're well within the Board of Education guidelines. With the 13th section, that'll keep our kindergarten average at about 19. And then we run the gamut from 19 to 20 with a high at about 23 in 8th grade. Comparatively, this is just a point of information. Enrollment is declining, not only here, but across the DIRG. We see the range of percent decreases. For us over the last 3 years, it's been about 5%, I think 7% over the last 10 years. The range across the DIRG is anywhere from plus 1 or 2% in Darien, New Canaan to a loss of about 12% in Easton Reading. These are the slides that I enjoy the most because these compare. Just drink it in. Here's really the point. We talk all the time about finding efficiencies and managing budgets. I think for me the proof is in the pudding. If you track the trend line for Wilton, comparatively speaking, our annual budget increases have been modest over the last 5 or 6 years, and our increases are well below our DIRG counterparts, with the exception perhaps of Reading, who in the last 2 years has posted more significant increases. I did. I don't know if I think that slide is here. Just as a point of reference, you have, we're going to briefly walk through a whole host of comparison slides, and one of the last slides has the most recent reporting on current budget proposals for the DIRG, to the extent that we're able to get them. So this is another number we look at all the time, our annual per pupil expenditure. Again, the trend line over the last 10 years has been very consistent. We are 6 out of 8 in spending, with only 2 districts, I think Easton and Ridgefield, who have a lower per pupil than we do. There's, I don't think there'll be any change going forward. But when you're trying to assess, comparative value for the dollar, Wilton spends conservatively and achieves highly.
We've been that way for 10 years.
And we've been that way for a long time, correct. Yep. The other just comparative metric that I track closely are compounded budget increases, and these are compounded increases across the DIRG. You'll notice since 2014, in terms of annual increases, Darien's had over 16% of compounded increases compared to our 7. We're nearly half of the increases of even Ridgefield and New Canaan. So how do we measure value? One of the returns on investment that we look at, obviously, is our graduation rate and what happens when kids leave us. So of the 97% of college-bound seniors, 65% of those in this most recent graduating class were accepted to the most competitive and highly competitive colleges and universities. So not only do most of them go on to schools, they go on to really, really good schools. This is another comparison slide. It's a year old, and it comes from the State Department, so it's tracking college entrance rates. The numbers are a bit depressed because they are only tracking, I think, four-year college entrance, and they don't pick up students who matriculate overseas. So you see some differential when you look at our local numbers versus what the state reports. And then beyond just going to college, when our students go, they stay. Recently, we have a 98.3% persistence rate, and better still, they go, they stay, and they actually graduate. The most recent data we have suggests that 84% of our students graduate within 6 years. The reality is they graduate within 4 to 5 years. That number has grown by 2 points in the last year, and I think is significant compared to the national average, which is 59%. Just a couple of notes on achievement. Our ACT scores continue to be very, very strong. This year, we posted 5-year highs in both English and science. Our composite score, I think, was 1/10 of a point off the high from 2016. So our kids, on just about every measure, do very, very well. Similarly, on the AP, 90% of test takers score 3 or better. Just as a note, the Business Operations Committee asked me this morning for the percentage of test takers in the junior and senior classes, so I'll have that data in the morning, and I'll send it out and share it. So the next set of slides, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You have it in front of you. The next set of slides represent the work that a number of us had done over the last 6 years at the request of the Business Operations Committee. And the goal was to try to generate a body of comparative benchmark data for the DIRG. That makes sense. It's organized in generally 3 categories. The first is comparative town demographic measures, including measures of wealth. The second group are comparative district staffing and spending measures, and then the third group are comparative achievement measures. So a couple of notes about the data. We looked for data sources that were common so we could have apples-to-apples comparisons. It wouldn't make sense to try to call around and fish out this information locally because you can't source the data, nor can you send somebody else to go find it. So there were a couple of data sites. One is, and you'll see I sourced all of them, the Connecticut Data Collaborative, and then the other is the database maintained by the State Department of Education, the connecticutedsite.gov. The downside to the data is that in some cases it's 2 to 3 years old. So what I would say is you're digging into it and looking at it, I would discourage you from focusing on any singular point of data and rather look at the trends and the comparative trends. So in this first instance, this is DIRG-A median household income from 2016 to 2018. You can see just reading across the line, this is true in most cases, Wilton is neither the highest nor the lowest. We track pretty closely with New Canaan, Weston and Darien are substantially higher, and it looks like Reading and Easton are quite a bit lower. The per capita income, again, New Canaan, Darien, Weston, Westport all are higher than we are, and Easton, Ridgefield, Reading are all a bit lower. In terms of median home price, we have 3 years worth of data there, and this is a story that's been told many, many times. home prices in Darien and New Canaan, and to a slightly lesser extent Westport, are higher than they are here in Wilton, in Weston, and then in Ridgefield, Easton, and Reading. The per capita tax comparison, that was an interesting one. And, again, if you just kind of read across the tops of the bars, New Canaan, Westport, Weston are all higher. We track next, then followed by Easton, Ridgefield, and Reading. So, again, the story here is we're all within a few points of each other comparatively. And I think this matters when you're talking about outcomes and school district outcomes, because we send our kids to exactly the same colleges and universities that our Durgay counterparts do, and we do it in a number of cases more cost effectively. Just moving on, there's poverty in all of our communities. It should go without saying. The rates are all fairly comparable. There's unemployment in all of our communities. The rates are anywhere from 3 to 4.5%. We also have students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. This data is a couple of years old, but in 2016 we had just under 2%. So briefly, and I'm only sharing this to kind of paint the picture for you, the next few slides are around staffing comparisons. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I would maybe go back and look at the New Canaan number here. They have multiple elementary schools, and I'm amazed that their with multiple schools, their administration, that number is that.
I can look at it again. So this data came from the State Department of Education.
But it just, with multiple schools, you would have more administrators per, and so I'm surprised.
Yeah, there may be, I'm not sure what the integrity guarantees are with the way the state does it.
Right. But that one stands out as being.
Sure. Right, and this is at an elementary school.
Right.
We have been confronted with a criticism of being too top-heavy just about annually. And I think when you start to look at the comparisons, you learn very quickly that that's not entirely the case if this is your reference group. Right, so
exactly.
Wilton's right in the middle of the pack. And actually, at the high school, our ratio is substantially higher than all of our counterparts, which suggests that we're thinly staffed administratively. And that trend actually holds through in the teacher ranks as well. So again, similarly, just at a glance, these are staffing comparisons, student and teacher, and you'll see where, except at the high school where the ratio trends higher, we're right in the middle of the pack, comparatively speaking. The next group of graphs are student to, the category was counselor, psychologists, and social workers, so all of our related service providers. We're right in the middle of the pack at the middle school and the high school. We trend with a lower ratio at the elementary school, and I think that speaks to our efforts at early intervention. This is the high school. Just another comparison metric that we were able to get from Shipman and Goodwin. These are teacher compensation comparisons across the DIRG, and these are reflective of each lane in our teacher's contract. And I think you can see immediately, maybe with the exception of the at the bachelor's maximum level, where there seems to be quite a bit more variability, we're pretty consistent all the way across and offer competitive salaries. We have chosen for many years to invest in expertise, and so that's why the 6-year maximum line is the way it looks. And then student achievement, I would just suggest to you that there are fluctuations year over year, but relative to our DIRG counterparts, we're always within a few points of the group on just about every measure. I think the most significant difference for us today is in mathematics. This is the State Department Accountability Index, and it's as I just described, we're all within just a couple of points. And it should go without saying that our achievement's very high. This is an AP score trend line across the DERG, and again, no difference in story here. We're all in the high 80s and low 90s. So I'm going to leave you with just a final thought on that. And since Chris isn't here, I was reminded of something she said repeatedly. But if you look at the slide, I came across this not too long ago. 4 things you can't recover: the stone after the throw, the word after it's said, the occasion after it's missed, and the time after it's gone. And so as Chris has reminded us for the last couple of years, our kids get one shot through our system, and that's why we invest the way we do, because we want to ensure that nothing's left to chance for them. And just to round it out, you have these dates, but we're going to be spending quite a lot of time together over the next month. As we have in the past, what I would ask in terms of process is, as you are digging into your budget materials, please email questions to me. Lucille and I will log them in a spreadsheet as we have. We'll assign them to the appropriate administrators, record the answer in writing, and then those will come back to you, and we'll selectively review questions and answers when we meet together. 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. I kept saying next week and 2 weeks. You've got a week. You have a week to study.
Yeah, the workshops are a week after. We get a week after. Next. And the next meeting is 2 weeks late. It is 3 weeks later.
That wasn't so bad. 56 slides.
Because in 2 weeks.
Well, I just,
Yeah.
I
On
was
the 24th.
with you this morning at the business
The
operations
presentation.
committee meeting, so I just want to echo your thanks to your whole team that put this budget together. There are certainly, opportunities for questions, and there are some areas to question in more depth. But I'm hoping at the end of this process that we can see this as a win-win budget, that we win for the needs of our district, and we win on the financial side. As this comes in below the Board of Finance guidance and seems to accomplish the goals. So let's hope that our questions just bear that out. So thank you.
Well done. I mean, in the face of some real challenges and some real needs, it's fantastic. It really is. It's good work. I'm sure all of those sitting behind you would love to have more. Okay. But no, I think it's a great job, guys. Well done, all of you. Because it's a collaborative effort from all of you to, so it was really well done.
Marianne, but I definitely have to. The work to put all the books together for Marianne and all the stuff that she did on this was
Yeah.
yeoman's work.
Well,
We never get to see her.
Yeah. And we never get to
No.
see her. No, she's all,
She's
Okay, so we have no action items tonight, and we have, our budget workshops are January 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. They're held in public, so anyone can come watch the fun, which it's incredibly interesting to see Kathy Kuhn present her. Just because she's sitting there.
Single her out, I
She
know.
has, why not? Because she can handle it.
She can ditch it out, she can handle it.
I want to hear about the creative curriculum, right?
Yes.
Anyway, that's the preschool thing. And then on the 24th, superintendent is presenting his budget, and so we don't have a meeting on the 24th, but our next meeting is on the 31st, and it'll be jam-packed with important things, including the alternative high school presentation. What did I just call it? Oh, it's just, I'm tired. It's the alternative school. It's grade 7 through 12, which is absolutely an incredible right thing to do, and I think everyone's looking forward to it. So I apologize for my misspeaking. If anyone quotes me, it was Prussia and not Russia. And
Sorry, I
Do we have to go there again?
I mean, Kevin and I weren't even at that meeting, but I think.
I heard all about it.
You can YouTube it.
Oh, great, okay. So it's time for the comments for the public. This is the point of at the end of our meeting when we welcome the public to come forward and if they want to make a comment to the Board of Ed. Since no one is coming forward, we will adjourn, motion to adjourn. Anyone make a motion?
Second.
Thank you, all of you, for putting up with me.
Kevin, on this slide.